Good evening. It is Monday, July 9th, and I call the Maple Plains City Council meeting to order. Please stand. Join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I am looking for a motion to adopt tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Moved by DeLuca.
Second.
Second by Cahill. Any further discussion? All in favor of approving the agenda as is?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. First item of new business is resolution 18-0625-0. Oops, I'm sorry.
No.
We have a consent agenda.
Oh, yeah.
So for a consent agenda tonight is hiring of Aubrey Sukup to the Maple Plain Fire Department.
I move we approve consent agenda.
Second.
Moved by Cahill, second by Fay. Any discussion? All in favor of approving hiring Aubrey Sukup for the Maple Plain Fire Department?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. New business this evening is resolution 18-0625-02, request for a conditional use permit amendment to allow additional antennas to be placed on the existing tower located at 5115 Industrial Street.
Honorable Mayor, Council, this first item is coming before you after being considered by the Planning Commission at their last Planning Commission meeting. And it's a request for a conditional use permit amendment to allow several additional antennas to be located on the existing tower at 5015 Industrial Street. The property itself is zoned industrial and it's guided by the city's comprehensive plan as industrial. It's approximately 4.5 acres in overall size. The property itself is located just in between Willow and Industrial Street on the and Poplar, so it's actually 3 streets around it. The site is currently used for an existing industrial use, a well drilling company, and there are 2 towers that are located on the back side or what would be the south side of that property. The city originally granted a conditional use permit to allow cellular communications tower, a cellular communications tower to be located on that property in 1996. The CUP was amended in 2016 to allow additional antennas to be located on the tower at that time. At the time that CUP was amended, it was noted that the original 12 antennas granted for that tower had increased to 36 without being documented in any format by the city. And so we then established in the new conditional use permit, or the 2016 amendment, that there be a total number of antennas on the tower so that the city could keep tabs on how many antennas and what equipment was located on the tower. So that CUP amendment in 2016 allowed 3 additional antennas to be located on the tower for a total of 36. The applicant is now back in front of the city again, and I should say applicant, it's actually a different applicant, but it's the same owner. So the tower has one ownership and it's got various users that have lease agreements on that tower. The user in this particular case, AT&T, is asking the city to consider allowing 3 additional antennas to be located on what I would call the second tier of antennas that are on that tower. There's several different tiers of antennas. And this second tier, the applicant would like to increase the number of antennas by an additional 3. That would bring the total number of antennas located on the tower to 39. So with the 39 antennas, the applicant would need the city to approve an amendment to the conditional use permit. The 3 additional antennas there would also be some other minor structural changes. There would be some lateral support arms that would be swapped out to be able to support the new antennas. The city did review the plans that were submitted by the applicant. We noted that there's also an additional main trunk cable that's being run from the base equipment up to these new antennas, but it's probably something that's not going to be perceivable or noticeable by anybody who's looking into this facility. And then it was also noted that there was a small transformer of sorts that was going to be located on the base of the building, but again, probably not perceivable. It's such a small component in comparison to the other base equipment. with that, the city has criteria for granting conditional use permits, and essentially it's that the use of the site for a cellular antenna tower does not take away from reasonable use and enjoyment from the surrounding properties, any potential impacts that are caused by the conditional use of the property are adequately mitigated. In this particular case, there's no real addition of base equipment that would change kind of how that tower is set up. And the 3 additional towers or antennas on this particular tower, given the number on that tower, I think that the 3 additional antennas in this particular case work on this tower. It was noted by planning commissioners that this is one of the ideal sites. It may not be for everybody exactly, but given the location in the industrial park, just given how it kind of blends into the overall landscape and where it's situated just geographically in the city, it tends to be a good site to allow the cellular communication antennas. And it was found that the 3 additional antennas did not further cause any impact to the surrounding properties that wasn't adequately mitigated. The one thing then that we noted from a staff level standpoint was we're seeing a lot of upgrades to cellular communications equipment on towers, and so we get a lot of requests for people wanting to just swap out equipment. And when I say swap out, they want to change the antennas out, they want to change out some of the lateral support arms, some of the repeater radios and things. The technology changes, and so they literally are swapping out. They're not increasing the number in certain occasions. And so we're proposing in the amendment that there be a provision added that the city could administratively approve replacement, but not addition of equipment on the cellular antenna. Just trying to be more efficient when we are reviewing some of these plans. It is noted, I would note that when we get these plans in, we ask for a full set of plans, including a structural analysis, even for equipment swap out from a third-party structural engineer that shows that the tower structurally can handle and accommodate the additional equipment or the change in equipment that's being located.
Yeah, one of the things that we did when we had some T-Mobile work up here is that in our agreement with T-Mobile, which obviously us being the owner of the facility, or in this case the water tower, we negotiate the terms. With this site, it's a private owner that owns the tower. He negotiates the terms. Just to touch on the administrative part that Mark mentioned here, with our agreement with T-Mobile, T-Mobile's allowed to replace equipment out if they do not add any number to the equipment. So if they wanted to replace 3 radios with 3 new updated radios, they can do that. There's nothing stopping them, and we would not do a evaluation of rent at that time. So it's just a different deal because this is a private tower that we're requesting that so that we can prevent coming back with additional conditional use permits with that. So.
Does anyone have any questions? With that, we will take a roll call vote then regarding resolution 18-0625-02.
Do we have a motion?
Yeah, we should have a motion for that. Looking for a motion
I move that we approve this resolution.
by Rhoda,
I'll second that motion.
second by DeLuca. Any further discussion? Okay.
Councilmember Cahill.
Aye.
Councilmember Fay.
Aye.
Councilmember DeLuca.
Aye.
Mayor Moskowski.
Aye.
Councilmember Broda.
Aye.
Ayes have it, 5-0.
Next item of business is resolution 18-0625-03, request for conditional use permit amendment to allow for a paint booth and additional parking at 5060 US Highway 12. And I'll turn that over to staff.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and Council. This item is also coming before you after being considered by the Planning Commission at their last meeting. And it's a request for a conditional use permit amendment as well to revise the site plan and allow the expansion of buildings on the property located at 5060 US Highway 12. The property itself is zoned mixed-use gateway, and it's guided by the city's comprehensive plan as mixed use. The site itself is approximately 0.9 acres overall. In 2015, the city granted a conditional use permit amendment for the an overall just update to the site plan relating to the proposed use as an auto body and repair shop for Collision Corner on the subject property. At the time the 2015 amendment was done, the city updated essentially how much parking was permitted on the site, where parking could be permitted on the site, fencing and screening requirements, landscaping, lighting, trash enclosure, and just general kind of other conditions associated with essentially just updating how the site was being used at the current time. And the city did that and adopted a conditional use permit amendment to continue to allow the use of the property for the auto body and auto repair business that was on the property. Since that time, the applicant has experienced a fire within the existing building, which took out the paint booth that they had located in the repair or in the body portion of the existing building, and has now submitted an application to the city for an amendment to the conditional use that would allow them to add a detached, or essentially detached but attached paint booth onto the side of the building. But it's kind of a separate building that they'd be adding on. And with that, they'd be also then revising portions of the site as it relates to parking, circulation, screening, and fencing around some of the parts of the property that are going to be worked on as a result of the building expansion. So as it relates to the overall site plan that was approved in 2015 and what's being proposed now, staff did a breakdown in the report that shows the parking spaces that were permitted as a result of the 2015 CUP, and we show that there was various areas that we had identified in the CUP for parking. We had identified Boundary Avenue, spaces in front of the building, spaces behind the building, and then for sale vehicle parking. With that, there was a total of 61 parking spaces that were permitted with the 2015. We're gonna pull up the site plan here in a second. I just have a technical difficulty, it's not working. So with that 61 spaces, that was what was previously approved in the 2015 site plan. The applicant is proposing a building expansion that would add the 1,000 square feet of new building located to the northwest corner, or in the northwest corner of the existing building. And with that, they would enclose a new paint booth and then a smaller storage, additional storage garage area that would be included in that addition. The proposed building would have exterior finished materials that would be similar to the existing building. Essentially, they'd match on how the finish or the veneer of the exterior building would be located. There would be one overhead door and one access door located on the west elevation of the proposed paint building addition. And so with that building addition, if, can I go to the site plan real quick? Yeah, okay, just keep going down. Okay, so here is the existing building is in this location right here, this general rectangle. The addition would be this rectangular, almost square building that would be added on to the northwest corner of the existing building. There would be overhead doors and an access door that would be located on this west elevation, so on this side of the proposed building. With this addition onto the building, you can see then that it starts to create a barrier to the flow of traffic that was normally coming around the building, and then in between the existing building and this existing detached accessory structure that's located on the property. And so with the proposed building addition, the reconfiguration of generally this whole back area would need to occur in order for the site to function with the new building located where it's proposed. With that, the applicant provided the city with a revised, essentially, layout of how they would foresee the additional would foresee a parking and circulation working with the new proposed building addition. And we go back and we looked at just how it related from a parking standpoint. That's been one of the topics of conversation and one of the issues that the city's worked with the applicant to try to resolve essentially on how the site is parked to ensure that it's orderly and that there's adequate parking for the number of vehicles on the property. So with that, the applicant did the revised plan and is showing now parking spaces that are in the same, using the same kind of counts in the same location. So we talk about parking on Boundary Avenue, which is this strip of parking here. In the originally approved CUP, there's 15 spaces. In the proposed configuration, there's actually 14 spaces in this location. So it would be a decrease of 1. In front of the building, in the approved 2015 plan, there were 5 spaces, essentially just in this area right here. With the revised plan, the applicant is proposing a total of 11 parking spaces, which is an additional 6. One of the things that they're doing is utilizing what was kind of a concrete walkway area in the front of the building, right in front of the front doors. They're proposing to stripe that into some additional spaces and then reconfigure the handicap accessible space. And then they'd add 5 spaces in this location and 1 space essentially in that location for a total of 11. Behind the building, in the originally approved layout, there's 31 spaces generally in this area here. With the revised configuration, the applicant's proposing 37 spaces, which is an additional 6. And then the for sale parking, which is located in front of the fence in this location here, the city approved 10 parking spaces with the 2015 CUP. The applicant's proposing to decrease that to 9. In order to accommodate these spaces, the applicant's proposing to add additional bituminous paving in this area, which would allow for access into those parking spaces, as well as would allow the cars to be parked wholly on bituminous pavement. And in doing that, they would be proposing to remove several of the existing trees. There's 3 trees in this location right here and 1 tree here that would be removed as a result of that revised layout and additional paving. So they'd have a total of 71 spaces, which is an increase of 10 from the originally approved CUP that had 61 spaces. In doing the review, there was a couple of things that were noted. One I talked about a little bit is this area that would have to be paved. This is the only area on the site that isn't paved, and one of the things that was discussed in the 2015 CUP was that the for sale parking cars needed to be parked wholly on pavement, and that was going to require the reconfiguration of that fence layout. As it turned out, how the fence was installed, those spaces were half on pavement, essentially half on grass, and in order to get to them, you had to drive across kind of that gravel driveway. And so in this revision round, one of the things that the city asked for was just to confirm the edge of the existing bituminous pavement as well as the MnDOT right-of-way edge and Highway 25. And so that property line now shows those existing conditions. And you can see in those existing conditions that there's an area that would have to be paved in here in order to make that happen. Even if you paved it as it's shown on the plan, those for sale parking spaces do not meet our requirements for retail kind of parking spaces, but they have been designated historically as for sale, which is kind of a different animal in that you're not getting general public driving into those spaces. Those are used by the applicant, so they can be, I think, a different size and layout, if you will. I'm still not 100% sure if that turning movement really works wholly on their property. I think it's really tight in order to do that, and I think that was a comment that our city engineer had made to us and staff, but that's something that if they were to pave this, essentially they'd have 100% of their site, actually it's more than 100% of their site paved because they paved some of the city right away historically on the Oak Street side. So with that for sale parking, the challenge there is they'd be taking down some existing trees and they'd have to come in and pave some more of the site in order to do that. One of the things that was then discussed with Planning Commission was if they move this access or this kind of through drive, which provides through circulation in this site, over to the west side of this existing detached accessory building. So the new circulation would go west of that. They'd have to reconfigure this portion of the fence as well as put in a gate in that area to provide access through that. And they have revised the plans now to show a gate that would be similar to the gate located on this side of the property that would allow that back area to be closed off when it's not being used so that it could continue to screen that back area. As you'll recall, this part of the property in this location is used for parts storage essentially back in this corner. And then oftentimes a lot of the cars that are damaged are, parked all in this back area here. So there was a concern of just visibility into the backside if that area wasn't screened. Outside of that, a couple of things that we noted. We just reviewed the existing conditional use permit and noted what hadn't been completed as a result of the 2015 approval. And there's a couple of things that were noted. One was parking lot striping. The city had required parking lot striping of the parking lot and all the spaces internal to the site, as well as the fire and access lanes. Since the original approval of the 15 CUP amendment, that hasn't been completed. And then parking signage relating to the fire lane was required to be installed. There was no parking signage that was installed along the Highway 12 corridor here. There were several signs that kind of, they're not permanent signs, I think they're temporary signs that are in this location. And then there was some additional landscaping that was required to be located in this area. There was some landscaping that was planted and placed on the owner's property across Oak Street. There was some additional landscaping that was noted and approved in the plan that needed to be installed here that wasn't installed at the time, or at this point it has not been installed since 2015. Outside of that, Planning Commission did hold a public hearing and reviewed the request. Planning Commission discussed a couple of things. One was if there's mechanical equipment or chimneys that protrude through the roof or on the roof of the proposed building, those would have to be wholly screened, which is a requirement we typically have. We don't have a mechanical plan showing those, but that was something that was proposed in the condition by the Planning Commission. The other thing that was discussed was there's parking spaces shown in this area, which are in front of overhead doors, and there's parking spaces shown in this area. There's an existing overhead door in this location right here. Planning commissioners discussed those overhead doors and whether or not there should be parking spaces counted in front of those areas, and commissioners ultimately recommended approval, noting that they felt that was the owner's issue if they were to block their own doorways with cars and weren't able to accommodate internal traffic, but didn't think that the city needed to block out these spaces as a result of the overhead doors. Ultimately, planning commissioners did talk through all of the various numbers and came up with the number of cars that are generally recommended by or proposed by the applicant, with the exception of one car in front of the building. And they recommended 10 spaces be permitted instead of 11 spaces. Outside of that, planning commissioners ultimately made a recommendation to the city council recommending approval of the CUP amendment subject to the conditions noted in the attached resolution. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions or comments?
Mark, wasn't there, several years ago, wasn't there some discussion to get cars to the for sale area, that there would be some type of gate on that fencing that would allow them access to it, not through the right away, but come in from the, that never happened?
Correct. And that's the issue with those for sale spaces
Right.
now, is the location of that fence didn't allow for those to be parked wholly on the bituminous, which was the requirement. And the only then way you could access those spaces was to come in from the north side or the northeast side of the fence and then come through. And there wasn't a provision made when the fence was installed.
There was or was
There
not?
was not. So there is no access to those spaces outside of coming on the south side of that property.
And you're saying it's questionable whether they'll be able to move those cars back and forth and remain on the bituminous?
The applicant's confident they can do it.
All right.
I think that it's tight in that location, but again, we're not talking about a retail customer parking. We're talking about them maneuvering the cars and getting them in there. They'd only be able to pave to their property line. The concern is that right now they're partially in the right of way with where they drive, and it's then wearing down the grass in the right of way. Obviously, it would when we had talked about that in 2015, the intent was to have it all paved so that, or access from the other side actually, so that we could get rid of kind of the grass tracks leading up to those for sale parking
And
spaces.
the only reason I ask is that's a focal point with, 15,000 cars going back and forth a day
Right.
on Highway 12 with snow removal, and gets to be kind of messy looking there as well. Okay, all right.
Can you explain again, the sixth spot directly in front of the building that the applicant is asking for, where they would add that? It's currently
There-
5 now.
Yeah, there's a concrete pad right in front of the front doors here. And in the original approval, that concrete pad was left as just a concrete pad.
Okay.
And kind of a walkway. I'll,
Here, might be able to help.
you can. Yeah, so there was, I don't know exactly where the front door is. Oh, it's right here. So this line here is this concrete pad. I don't know if you can make that out.
Yeah, okay.
But the front doors are right here. So in the original proposal, they had parking spaces that went on this side of the concrete pad, and then parking spaces that went on this side.
Okay.
But there was no spaces, so they've added now the requisite handicap, but they've, in redoing the striping, then they added one space essentially by restriping that whole area.
Does that handicap spot have the ramp there, or is that what that cement,
There is no grade variation, so it's,
is that legal?
I think it's all accessible the way it's set up because it's an existing condition, and they're not proposing to repave that. I don't think we'd require anything new, but there isn't a grade separation with that. That concrete pad is at grade basically. But so no, there is no ramp existing that they'd be using one way or the other.
Has the fire chief seen this new plan?
Yeah, the fire chief is fine with the gate backside. It's unlikely that during a fire event, he's gonna try to get in from Highway 12 is, I think, his note, but having the ability to get through there is
Important.
yeah, preferable at some level.
Right.
But I doubt that, he wasn't as concerned about this gate location down here.
I mean, that is one of my concerns, is safety.
Yeah, the chief is okay
Signage
with the
and striping.
proposed plan.
Couple questions. The proposed building includes about almost 1,300 square feet under roof that doesn't exist now. What was the rationale or logic for adding cars to the back area when you've taken 1,300 square feet out of what used to be the backyard?
It's just the way that they are reconfiguring the site. There's a couple of things. One, they're adding parking spaces in this location here up against the new building and parking spaces here. And in the old plan, this was kind of undesignated or untapped space. So they didn't have it laid out as efficiently maybe. But it is a good question. They're reconfiguring how they're proposing that back area to add some additional spaces. And then again, they're talking about adding spaces to the front.
Right. In 2015, one of the big contention points was numbers of cars. So here we see 1,300 square feet roughly of space being added under roof, and then additional car spaces being put in the back. It appears too that there's now a designated fire lane. What will we do to ensure that that fire lane is remained open all the time? Because I assume a fire lane cannot have anything in it at any time.
Right, and that was the condition that we had in 15 that hasn't been complied with yet, relating to striping and signing that designated fire lane. And so that again is a condition, and it's shown on this plan, it's noted on this plan that it would need to be striped onto the pavement. Then it would just be an enforcement issue.
What's the reasoning for adding cars out front? Because you've gone now from 6 up to 10.
I think that would be I think that would be a petitioner question or applicant question.
Okay.
From a planning commission, there was a lot of discussion about it. Ultimately, they thought that area could be used for cars, but that was one of staff's questions, was should additional cars be added to the front, given that was the most visible portion of the site.
And it seems strange that you'd have a proposed building with overhead doors and then plan out spots to sit right in front of those doors. And did planning commission have thoughts on that?
They did. That was another question that staff had posed, was should the city count those spaces given that they're in front of what you would perceive to be used overhead doors? But planning commission's discussion essentially ended with it's up to the owner to be able to essentially jockey their cars internal to the site or maneuver their cars when they need them moved, but that they would allow those spaces to be counted.
Could I add something to that?
Then the existing wood board fence in front of the sales area, or behind the sales area, there appears to be a gate, but the gate is not contingent with the rest of the fencing. It looks like it's split. Am I interpreting that correct?
So in the so this just trying to read it so I could. So this would be the proposed gate here. Oh,
We'll get you a better view.
yeah.
Hold it right away from you.
All right. So this is the new proposed gate that would come down and then tie in over here to this corner. This section of fence would have to be removed, and that's what it's noted on there.
But I
that-
don't see those two fences tied together on that plan.
Yeah, and I think there's just a missing post in this location, just graphically shown, because my assumption was that it came down here and then tied back over. I mean, but I don't.
Your assumption, or is that what they're planning to do?
Well, I think that's how I read the plan. I don't know if they've got a different version of that, but that's how I read it, is that there's an angle on that fence. And maybe the applicant can clarify.
There is.
Do you know?
Oh, yes, there is. I mean,
Yeah.
we'd be connecting it on an angle, yes, we just, right angle. He just didn't put the drawing, he didn't draw a line there.
So you're saying it would be here or here?
Anyway, nice back. Where's, point to the existing building. I don't have my glasses.
This
Yeah,
is
there,
the
no,
exist-
Yep, no.
So come across.
Yeah, and right up, straight up.
And then go here?
Right there, right at that point, yes. Right where you had it.
I believe Mark Bradford, he left that open for discussion because you can access that for sale proposed blacktop area from either that point that doesn't show a post, like
Mhm.
along the fence, or through the gate along that area. We were kind of going to see if the city had a preference as to which.
You're saying there could be a gap here or a gate here too?
Well, there could be a gate there, or that could be used as access to get in and out of the for sale spots.
Well, which way is it? Kurt just said it was gated, you just said it's
Well,
not.
We would like it gated.
He'd like a gate, but
For security purposes and visual, when you come down Highway 12, you can't see into our lot. We're trying to hide everything in our lot. So more gating and more fencing that we can put up is better.
but if you as a council preferred a different access, that is an option to look at for a recommendation on your part.
Is the gate gonna roll? Is it going to
It's going to
pivot?
be- It's going to be just like the gate that's currently, on the east side,
On boundary?
on
identical.
And I think Mark put that on the plan, that it's,
No, and he mentioned that, and I'm sorry, I guess I haven't paid attention to the gate on Boundary. Does it swing, does it
Oh, it's a
roll?
nice rolling gate.
It's a rolling gate.
It's a really nice gate.
So is it going to roll into the existing building, or is it gonna roll into the third car in the parking spot?
it would have to roll to the parking spot,
So if there's a car there, it won't roll.
correct?
Then it's
But-
not a gate, it's a fence.
Well, gates can roll, gates can hinge, this way. It's just like a refrigerator door, almost a bifold refrigerator door, they can open in the middle or it can slide to a side. But it's a gliding, same post, same style gate.
They might put it on a roller that bifolds. We talked about that, on how we're gonna have to do it to make it. It's not a gate that's gonna be used a whole lot by any means. But we wanna make sure it's able to open if it's necessary for an emergency.
Mayor, can I ask the applicant a question about the car counts?
Yes, you can. Can you please go to the microphone?
Up here?
Yes, thank you. Just because we're recording it and then everyone can hear us.
Not a
Because
problem.
I'm asking Kurt the question that I asked Mark. Why are you coming in looking for more spaces in the back and more spaces in the front?
You want to?
Can I, thank you for speaking with us again. Bobby, is there any way to quickly look at our car counts and what that number was with the 2015 Cup? Because my memory is probably failing me, but I thought it was over 60, and I know Mark had mentioned earlier that we're proposing 77 and our last was 60. Am I just?
No, so 71 and 61, or 71 and 60. But I included the resolution from the last approval.
So was it at 60 including the employee parking on Boundary, or was it at 75?
61 spaces.
Including the employee parking? Okay.
And I've got the old resolution here
Oh, good.
that shows what was approved in 15.
All those car counts that we've done through the months, I just felt like I needed to revisit that number.
No, I think there was a few things in the car counts that the tough part is when you're doing a car count on this site is that there's a back corner triangle of the lot that is not designated by a number so much as it is an area, that this area can be used for that. So
Well, but I'm going back, Bobby, to the
Yeah.
counts that were in the conditional use permit in 2015, the
Correct.
amendment. That was
Correct.
61 total. In
Correct.
the count, according to what I read in here, 31 were in the back. You're now proposing 37. My simple math says that's an increase of 6 cars in the back. When you've put 1,300 square feet under there and you've designated a fire lane. I'm asking, why did you ask for an increase in the back area?
Well, because it would be nice to have, for starters.
Okay.
And then secondly, Mark Ronberg, the way he configured it, we had some double parking the last time, which wasn't along the north side of the property line. There was some piggyback parking or double parking, which wasn't always really easy to use. If you wanted to get to that back car, you had to move the car in front. So it's just a little more streamlined and a little more efficient.
And then why are you asking for an increase in the front area?
To stay out of, to try to stay in compliance and keep everybody happy with Collision Corner,
It's really hard to police our parking lot up front with the customers.
especially when they see a big open
Yep,
spot.
when they see a big open spot sitting there, that's the first place they're going, because it's safe, easy, convenient, and they think that's for them.
They
So
don't, they don't think about driving down Boundary, going to the very back, walking up Boundary to go into the front door. They see an open parking lot, and it would just be like any other business. You just would naturally want to park in the front and get to the front door. So that's why we're proposing that, and I know it's been a bone of contention through the years. But prior to the 2015 Cup, we did have
more parking up in the front, so we miss that. We miss it a lot, and we need it.
Then my final question is, why did you put spots in front of the doors, in front of your 16-foot and 9-foot doors?
We did that because our back door, we don't have a spot. There's a garage door on the north side that you see we don't have a proposed parking spot. On the east side, the garage door next to the K-Bid building, we don't have a spot there because those are doors that we use quite often. We don't have a parking spot in front of the south garage door that's currently there. We don't have a spot there because we use that. The spray booth door, where we have 2 proposed spots there, if we need to come out that way, we'll move those 2 cars. Otherwise, we'll just go back into the existing building with cars that are in the spray booth. So we currently have 3 garage doors right now that have been existing that we don't have parking spots in front of.
I'm not sure I got an answer as to why you parked in front of, you put 4 spots in front of
Because
us.
it gave us the option to use the parking spots if we needed to. And
That door we hardly ever use. We open it just for air to come through.
no, this is the new door
The new
that he's
building.
talking about, Kurt.
What door right now?
The new garage door.
Oh, that's a drive-through spray booth, the one we're proposing. So you can load from inside the shop, or you can load from the outside of the shop. If you have a big item, you can actually back it in a boat or a big truck. You can go from the outside. Will we always be driving through every day? No, not even close. Will we go through once in a while? Yes. If there's a car in the way, we'll just move the car. So that's why we're proposing those parking spots. It's a doorway that'll hardly ever be used, but it's there just in case for that job.
Question and a comment, and and I don't care if you or Mark answers this, but this site plan is very descriptive. Will these spaces all be marked? Or is it just for identifying for the car count?
The intent of the conditions that we had established in the 2015 resolution, as well as what's being proposed now, is that these spaces all are striped on the
And
pavement.
that's a condition before the permit is issued, before the spray booth could be started, is that correct?
Correct.
That they be identified in yellow paint and.
Or white, yes.
Or white or
Yep.
whatever. Okay.
And signed.
Right.
Inside.
Signed is also noted in there as well.
And I want to say once here and once, maybe twice with the planning commission, we've talked about this. And we spent a lot of time and a lot of money. You've spent a lot of money getting these site plans put together, seeking approval from the planning commission and the city council, and it's all fine and dandy, but the point of contention at the end of the day is, will it be followed? Will it be followed?
I would say this is the best site plan we've ever had down there.
Will it be followed?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So my question, maybe a follow-up to that, is in other CUPs that have been recently approved, there's been a fee schedule that's been attached to be very transparent as to what would happen with non-compliance. I saw that missing from this. Is there a reason for that? or-
Yeah, I think what you could end up doing to help this is that, this is a change in site plan. Obviously, you're
Mhm.
adding a building and the way that the site plan is laid out. You would want to attach the conditions in the previous conditional use permit from 2015 that would include that fee schedule to make sure that's implemented
Okay.
with this conditional use permit because of this site plan change.
Sure. And then is there a way to, because we all want you guys to comply with this too, and for everything to work out. Is there a way to create like a lock and step that certain things need to be completed before they get to the end goal, or how does that?
I think it's I'm just going to give a historical context as an answer to this, and that is that something that's been done in the past and it hasn't happened, and then other times there have been criteria that have been met, maybe not all the criteria, but some of it has been met. So you're certainly able to lay out steps that say, we expect this part of the conditional use permit up, completed by this date. The reality is, when it comes to compliance with the conditional use permit, is we can implement a fine, but you can't revoke the conditional use permit unless you revoke the conditional use permit.
Okay.
So, that's really what it comes down to. So if it costs, $30,000 to stripe a parking lot, I'm just making this number up.
Sure.
I got to get 10 fines before I even get to where it costs to stripe the parking lot. So it's, like I said, I think Collision Corner has completed some of these things that have been laid out, and some of them they have not.
Bobby and/or Mark, whoever can best answer this. I'm very supportive of giving them a building permit for the proposed spray booth. Is there any way to provide that space without going through the conditional use permits and all the other stuff that goes around that? Is this all or nothing?
It is from the standpoint that in order to accommodate the spray booth, they have changed the site plan that we previously approved, and they'd have to do it in order to add it. And so that kicks it back into this site plan review process, which amends the conditional use.
No, that makes sense.
The one thing I will note in the resolution in front of you tonight, at least, it states in there that all conditions of the CUP relating to the site improvements, landscaping, and parking shall be fully satisfied prior to issuance of a paint booth building permit. So that's prior to issue, they would, so there are no steps that we're talking about, we're just talking, last time we talked about steps and they weren't done. So this is just, get the stripes, get the fence, get the paving, and get the landscaping done, and then the
And then
building.
the permit is
And
issued.
then you could apply. for
Yeah,
the
well, then you can get
Um,
the permit.
For
Yeah.
the permit.
Yep.
Okay.
Does that include the striping and the paving for the new spaces that they proposed?
It would
So
be-
they'd have to pave those
it-
before the building permit?
Yeah, it would be to realize this plan that's being proposed all of those site improvements would have to be completed.
So I think everything, personally, I think everything is reasonable, and I want your business to keep succeeding and doing well. It's probably a blessing in disguise. They have too many customers trying to park there, but I want to see you guys do this. But like the thing for me is I also want to see compliance across the board, because I hate having those conversations. And so if you feel like this is gonna work, and we have the fee schedule outlined, and there's the items that need to be done prior to the issuing of a building permit, I think this is a good step forward, and I hope there's no more discussions with the non-compliance in the future with this CUP. So
Can I ask a question? To Mr. DeLuca's point about using the old cup. If this was approved tonight, there's been some back and forth with the spray booth company and the delay, and they have a deposit, and it's kind of been a lot of moving pieces with financing and banking and the booth being built. If this was approved and for some reason the bids came in higher and he just chose not to do it, would the old CUP be in place?
No. I mean, the way that this conditional use permit is written up because of the change of the site plan, I mean, really, we're approving this site plan. We're not approving this site plan with an alternate fallback on the previous site plan. It doesn't work that way with conditional use permits. So, I mean, this is the site plan that it is.
So could it be written up to fall back on it? That's maybe a legal question.
Yeah,
I don't know.
because this has gotten drug out on our end. Who's ever, but we're 8 months into this, and it's like, if all of a sudden we need to,
It would be nice if there
Right.
was a legal way to be
Just
able
fall
to
back
fall
on it.
back on it.
Yeah, I think what you probably would want to make a determination as to whether you're gonna go with the status quo or you're gonna go with the new site plan, so maybe that would involve tabling your application for a while or withdrawing and then resubmitting it when you know the answers to those questions.
There's no other legal way around that?
Well, the problem is you've got the way it is now and the way it'll be under whatever new site plan would potentially be approved. And It's not just a removal of that after a certain number. The CUP runs with the land, so if there's an approval of that, that stays with your property and overlays whatever's there now. So you'd want to be sure that's what you want before you did that. There can be, small modifications to it to address certain things, of course, but you gotta pick a path.
I mean, so is there a way to put like a 30-day time frame in there until we get
No, it's a
these
different
back?
application.
It is a
You'd be really
different,
talking
okay.
about an interim use
No, I've been
permit.
wondering about
Yeah.
that. And to Mr. DeLuca's point with this question, it is completely different with the parking spaces. The size of the booth is about the same, but yeah.
I think the question maybe, Kurt and Michelle need to answer is, kind of summing up what John said is, are we going to do a paint booth? Is this the paint
Well,
booth?
we have to do a paint
We have
booth,
to do paint
but
booth.
it's whether we should put it where the existing one was, or, because we've been
Sure.
at this for a few months trying to just add it in different ways, just city approval ways, banking, the spray booth company. It's been a lot of moving pieces. And along the way, we've had a lot of questions ourselves about just the extent and the scope of the work, and here we are, it's July, and that's why the striping we lost last winter because of the fire, and I mean it's a lot to get done before the snow flies.
I
I
guess,
think the question, go ahead, Kurt.
well, I don't see any reason to strike the parking lot until the construction is done, for
But
starters.
they want you to do that.
But you're asking us to strike the parking lot before they'll destroy all the striping.
But we've been asking for that since 2015 for safety.
I
So-
say you just stripe it, and if it gets destroyed in the little area, then they come back and they restripe it again.
Perfect.
I think the question here that I struggle with is the addition of a 1,300 square foot paint booth on your footprint, the responsible thing to do with that piece of property. That's what I have been struggling with over the last month or so. Trying to figure out, is this plan I'm looking at a responsible use of that footprint? And I keep coming back to a comment that I made in 2015. We're trying to jam a lot into a very small piece of property. And your business has kind of outgrown this footprint. And I come to the conclusion that I'm not sure that is a responsible use of that piece of property for that use when you're adding all the cars you're proposing to do in the front, in the back, paving more pieces of the property in the front, in the sales area, putting a split fence that we can't even get an answer whether it's open or closed between the two of you. We've got cars parked in front of doorways that seem like that's not the most efficient, safe use of something. And then you're asking us to approve a conditional use permit that I just heard you say, and I'm not really sure that that's what we want to do.
Well, it's not that we don't want to do it. We want to do it. We need the space. That's why we came here in 2015 with the proposed addition of putting an addition on. And because of the soil corrections that are needed in that area, the soil alone, the corrections were almost $100,000. We were going to have to do pilings instead of footings, and the cost of it became so exorbitant that the business couldn't sustain the short-term and long-term debt. It didn't make sense on paper. Now, with the fire that happened, having the spray booth out of the building, it's been a tremendous financial impact, not being able to keep up with the painting that they used to be able to do. But it also has opened up the back of the inside of the building, and it is the space that they need on the inside. They need more space, and having more space will make everything much more efficiently, run smoother. And so I think it's smaller than what we initially proposed that you approved, but and the one garage door, the other garage doors are open. The one garage door that you're speaking to, having spaces in front of it, that will more than likely the cars will go in the building versus out that side. And we do with 3 other garage doors that don't have parking in front of it. And if they need to pull out, they're going to have to move a car. But it'd be nice to be able to use that space. We put a deposit down. Spray booths are very expensive. They're over $100,000. And unfortunately, no one was hurt. Thank goodness the fire happened during a business day. But it's been catastrophic on paper for Collision Corner, quite honestly. And we put a deposit down